Hi, in this video I will teach you how you can set up a self-hosted Ghost instance. I might be able to save you some time setting up your Ghost instance, but money definitely not. You could also be a normal person and just buy Ghost subscription, but if you're like me, you want total control of your server instance and you want to mess with Ghost, then this video is perfect for you. Setting up Ghost server wasn't that hard, but also I have experience with managing servers. In this video I will teach you how you can set up Ghost and its environment, from setting up Node.js, proxy server, your database, MySQL in this case, setting up newsletter and mailing, resetting your admin password in case you forgot your password. You can always reset it on the server side. And I'll show you my method of migrating from WordPress to Ghost, because I previously was blogging WordPress and I got tired of WordPress and managing its plugins. Method is a bit different from the official method. Anyways, you can follow along this video or you can just skip to the chapter that interests you the most. To choose the right server for your Ghost blog, first let's go through the official requirements. Operating system isn't necessarily required to be Ubuntu. In my case, I'm using CentOS, and I guess it can be any kind of operating system. Server with at least 1 GB of memory. In my case, that wasn't enough. I'd also like to add to these requirements is that you also need the basic command line and server management knowledge, because all of the setup will be done through the terminal. You also need a domain name, something that you can map to your blog server instance. And lastly, it will take you about an hour of configuration, maybe less. I don't want to say how much time it took me the first time, because it was a lot of back and forth and I had to migrate my previous WordPress blog instance to Ghost. Now let's talk about hosting solutions. There are a bunch of hosting solutions, but I only mentioned the ones that I tried. I tried AWS and I tried Hetzner. I'm using only Hetzner. I prefer it because you can get so much better performance, so much better RAM and virtual CPUs for a lot less money. I'm using 8 gigs of RAM, two the virtual CPUs, and it takes me about 18 euros per month, and that's with backups included. If you choose to go with AWS, you got two options. If you don't want to go through the installation of Ghost, you already have a ready installation, and you can choose to go with Lifesail. And when choosing a new Lifesail instance, pick Ghost. You can go with AWS Marketplace, and this will install the same thing, but not on Lifesail, it will install it on EC2. In both cases, you will end up with Apache as a proxy server, and I prefer Nginx instead of Apache. What's best with AWS Lifesail and this installation is that I mentioned you don't need to worry about installation. You only need to configure your mailing settings, map your domain name DNS record to your instance, set a Meglan, and if you were previously using a different blogging platform, then you need to migrate it to Ghost. But what's most important, you can fall into free tier. AWS has a free tier, and you can end up not paying for an instance for 3 months. So to sum it up, the key is to find the right balance between the performance and cost. In this demo, I will guide you through the setup of Ghost blog running on CentOS operating system on a Hetzner VPS. I'd go with the recommended 1 GB RAM minimum for this demo, but Hetzner offers a minimum of 2 GB, and that's great, it's still a cheap price. I previously used Ubuntu for my server setups, but Ubuntu is also known to get unstable with system updates. Eventually it gets unstable. Whereas CentOS has a longer release cycle and it's known to be more stable. Before creating a new server instance, let's take a look at my firewall. It's a whitelist type of firewall where only connections with these 4 points are allowed. SSH port, HTTP, HTTPS, and this is for demo purposes the default ghost port. I wouldn't recommend exposing it in production. The reason I have a 2368 port temporarily allowed is that I want to demo Ghost, running Ghost, without a proxy server that is listening on these 2 ports, 80 and 443. Let's create a server. Let's make it CentOS. Texture is this one. Okay, 4 gigs of RAM is even cheaper one. I don't know the reason, but let's take it. Leave the networking as is. SSH keys. This is to allow passwordless access to your server. There is no traditional password. If you're interested, I did make a video on how to set up passwordless login. Volumes, I don't need it. Firewalls, enable the firewall, at least firewall 4 ports. Backups, not interested. Okay, I believe this is enough. And it will cost me only 4.74 euros. Now that I've logged into my server instance, I want to configure it, and first step is to create a ghost user where I already created that user. In that user I will install global npm packages, and that user can only be accessed from the root user. To be able to install npm packages, I will first have to install Node.js, and let's work with version 18. Although 20 is recommended, I was having trouble installing the recommended 20. I think it was problem with the patch version. Okay, let's see what the version installed is. Okay, now I can continue with installing the Ghost CLI, but before Ghost CLI, I want to be able to install global packages without sudo. And this is how you configure your npm to install global packages locally per user. Okay, and to make it permanent, I need to export that path for the global package directory to be able to call commands like ghost locally and to propagate those changes. This is what I call. You don't need to call source every time, just this once, because bash rc file will load on each login. Let's install Ghost CLI. Okay. And lastly, I will install Ghost in the Ghost directory. Instead of running it on localhost, we'll change it. So now your Ghost is installed on localhost, running on localhost. And you can adjust your configuration, and by default you have a configuration development JSON, but if you copy it to production, next time on the next restart it will pick up production configuration. Let's edit our configuration, and instead of localhost, let's make it listen on everything. And I wouldn't recommend it. It is just for this demo purpose. Sometimes Ghost restart doesn't work. You explicitly need to do Ghost stop and Ghost start. Let's take a look if our configuration was successful. I should see a Ghost block. Okay, this is our starting point and we are just at the beginning. Now we have to configure all this stuff. We have to configure in the different database and the proxy server and so on. But okay, we have our Ghost running on our server. Ghost is running, but what if your server suddenly restarts or your Ghost instance suddenly crashes? You'd want to make it resilient. You do that by making a systemd service. So instead of calling explicitly Ghost start, restart, stop, we will use a systemd instead of it. To create systemd Ghost service, go back to root and create Ghost service. And your Ghost systemd script will look like this. Sorry, I have a placeholder, it's not expo Ghost. Ghost. This is the script that is called each time when you call a systemd. And it's controlled by a Ghost user. And we're good. And I want to enable that service. And I want to stop this service. And I want to start I also want to start Ghost. And how do I know that it started? With status. And how can I stop it? With stop and start and restart, everything works. With adding of systemd service, you made your Ghost service resilient to crashes as system restarts. When you first install Ghost, it will install an embedded SQLite 3 database. But with the next major release of Ghost, MySQL will be required, and that's MySQL 8. And also it's more performant than using an embedded SQLite 3. So let's get started. Let's install MySQL. It is recommended that you go through MySQL secure installation. I will disallow root login remotely, but I will show you how you can log in without the remote login, but you can do it from your local machine with what's known as an SSH tunnel. Okay, and let's see. Okay, I'm there. And I have to create a Ghost database and a Ghost user. And now that I've installed the database, created the database and the user, I want to configure my Ghost configuration. Client is no longer SQLite 3, it is MySQL. And connection is no longer in file name, it is no longer in file name, it is with host and port. To propagate different configuration for the database, I need to restart Ghost. And restart doesn't always work, so I explicitly call stop and start. To set your admin user, go to /ghost. And to see what we have in MySQL, I'll log into MySQL and see what's there. Those are all of the tables created and needed for the Ghost platform. What if I log out of my Ghost and I forgot my password? I didn't also set up an email, so only solution for resetting my admin password would be directly from the server. And it's an easy one. You can reset a new admin password directly from the server MySQL by assigning it a new password hash. And to get the password hash, go to, for example, this website, and you can also do it from Node.js, but I'm too lazy for it. And let's say my password is, go back to MySQL and you will update the users table with with that new password hash. And your next password will be this one. And that's it. You can now use your new password. Let's reset it. And my user was this one. And what was the password? Okay, easy. Now you know how to reset your admin password directly from the server. If you disabled remote access to your MySQL database, you can still access it remotely, but with the help of SSH tunneling. And this means I'll open a new terminal. Always open a tunnel first. Our server IP is and this takes up a 3307 port and port forwards MySQL service that's listening on localhost 3306 on this server with this IP. And now you can go to, for example, MySQL Workbench, connect to database, and it's 3306, it's still localhost. Now it behaves as if this service is locally running. Okay, this is the remote root user and password for the remote root SQL. And now you can browse on that MySQL server, GhostDB is installed, and you can play around and manually modify tables. For example, if you want to manually reset the admin password, you will go into users, and there you see my demo user, the admin user of Ghost. And for example, you can reset the admin password by updating a new password hash. In case you forgot your admin password, that's the way to do it from the database directly. If, for example, you were connecting to the database in IntelliJ, you don't need to set up an SSH tunnel separately because IntelliJ sets a tunnel for you. Here you would enter your host and, if it's passwordless, this option I will select, server IP, port 22, server username, in my case it's root, click OK. And there you have it. And also set up if port 3306 is taken, set up 3308 or whatever. And here you would enter localhost 3308, remote MySQL username and password, and that's it. You could connect also through IntelliJ data source. Next, with Ghost setup, you would want to set up a mailing service, and there are two different mailing configurations. One is for transactional email, and that is done in the config production JSON file. I won't set up exactly, but I'll show you what to watch out for. You need to create, if you don't have a mailgun, create a new mailgun domain, and there's an OK tutorial to set up mailgun and DNS server mappings. So I suggest you read this quick start guide. Then you would create an SMTP user and a new credential. The setting will be very similar to this one. You set from So the sender, if you don't send it, I think Ghost will warn that there is no sender set up. And you set up your credentials for the SMTP user that you created. And all the rest is the same, except the region. Maybe you are in the EU or you are elsewhere. In the EU, the host is this one. For everyone else is this one. For the newsletter, you would go into settings. It's done via web. Search mailgun. And then again, region, are you in the US or EU? And your mailgun domain. As for private API key, the only key that worked for me is the webhook HTTP signing key. And that is found by going to your Mailgun settings, API keys, and there's a section called HTTP webhook signing key. For migrating WordPress to Ghost, I followed the official documentation, but it did not work for my blog. I ran into a couple of issues. They recommend to install a WordPress plugin. What it will do is convert your XML export into format that is importable by Ghost. And you would go into settings, search for import export, and you need to import that XML file with the universal link. I wasn't successful in exporting with the Ghost WordPress plugin. I ran into issues. Then when I fixed those issues, still the import wasn't successful because image paths were not correctly exported. Ghost also has another tool that is usable from the terminal, and it's WordPress API export, and this would be the best one. But also I use two-factor authentication, so I don't know how to set it up with two-factor authentication. You would call this method, this will be your WordPress blog, and also one parameter that's missing is if you want to import all of the posts that are both in private and in draft mode, you would add an out parameter, but then again, if you're using two-factor authentication, maybe this is the easy way. This is the export in terminal via XML method. So what you would do is go to your WordPress and export your XML WordPress. That is found in tools and export all content. And then you would, of course, you would first install the CLI tool and call this function. Path to file is path to your WordPress XML export file. And what it does, this converts your WordPress XML file into a file that is importable by Ghost. Then you would import that file in the universal import. I don't know why, but that was the only method that correctly worked for me. After exporting, be sure to double check, because in Ghost there are no categories, they are converted to tags, and that is not an issue. But featured images, I had to reset alternative tag for every post into the feature image. And if you previously no indexed your WordPress posts, there is not such a functionality to remove certain pages from the site. One option would be to create a robots text file and put it in the root of your theme directory, and then bots would read that robots file and wouldn't crawl websites that you pages that you don't want bots to crawl. Another option is manually setting a no index meta tag into each post. But I think creating a robots file is the easiest way. This is an example of my robots. I don't want bots to crawl tag pages, author pages, and some other pages. This is what I can change, because tag pages are still there in the sitemap. This would require manually editing the Ghost instance, the handler for the sitemap. and I wouldn't recommend it because you will need to update Ghost eventually and this will go away. Instead of accessing your website, your blog with the IP and port, I'm going to serve it behind the real domain and remove this access from my Hetzner firewall. To serve blog instance on HTTPS port and port 80, I will install Nginx proxy server. Okay, now Nginx is working and we have to configure our ghost to be served on the domain. It will be HTTP and HTTPS. I created for this demo subdomain on my blog, and this will not work currently because Nginx isn't configured. And I also configured the full SSL encryption, meaning that I need to have SSL certificates installed on this server for this to work. For HTTPS serving to work, I created a new origin certificate and I installed it on this server. Next, what I need to do is set a configuration for this subdomain. Let's call it. This means it will only serve the 443 HTTPS. For HTTPS, it needs these certificates. And all of the requests from domain are going to be proxy passed to the 2368 port where Ghost instance is running. Verify that the configuration is alright. And restart Nginx. And there you have it. Now Ghost is serving on this subnode domain. One more thing that you need to configure in Ghost. Go to production configuration and instead of this, try changing it to your domain name. And we don't want Ghost to respond to any other host except localhost or on 27001. And for the changes to take effect, I need to restart Ghost. Well, I made a mistake somewhere. Okay, that's my mistake. Restart the test. And now your Ghost instance is running on localhost. It is not accessible via IP and port. And also Nginx is configured to proxy pass to Ghost instance when you go to this domain name. And this domain is mapped to the IP address of the server. Some final tips on your Ghost blog. Whenever you change something, whenever you change your configuration, be sure to restart your Ghost service. Always double check that your Ghost configuration contains the correct URL of your domain. I hope that this video was useful for those of you who would want to self-host your Ghost blog.